The cold northern wind drifted slowly across the fjords, carrying with it the salt of the sea and the scent of pine from the forests. The waves moved with heavy rhythm, rising and falling as if the ocean itself breathed in long, endless sighs. Along the rocky shore, the tide left fragments of shells and smooth stones, shining faintly under the pale glow of the moon. In the distance, mountains rose like guardians of the land, tall, silent, and covered in snow that reflected the starlight. Between their peaks, hidden valleys stretched far inland, where rivers cut through the frozen ground and whispered in voices softer than dreams. Villages clung to the coast like shadows, their wooden halls built with strong timbers taken from the forests. Smoke curled slowly from the hearth fires, blending with the night sky, carrying the smell of roasted fish, mead, and burning oak. Within these halls, men and women sat close to the warmth, speaking quietly, their voices like low murmurs, as if not to disturb the stillness outside. And out there on the shore a ship rested. Its hull was carved from oak, its sides lined with shields, each painted with colors now faded by salt and time. The ship was silent, but not forgotten. For every plank, every nail, every carving carried with it a story of voyages across endless seas, of storms survived, of lands discovered, and of battles fought beneath the watchful eyes of gods. The night deepened, and the stars grew brighter above. Somewhere in the darkness, a raven called, its wings cutting across the sky, as if it carried a message from another world. To the north, where the horizon met the sea, a faint light shimmered, the first sign of the aurora, dancing slowly, like spirits awakening from their long slumber. And so begins the tale of the North, a story not of one man, but of many. Not of a single moment, but of countless nights, countless voyages, countless dreams carried by the wind across the frozen waters. The ship stood upon the shore like a slumbering beast, its wooden hull resting on the damp sand, its curved prow carved into the shape of a serpent, gazing eternally toward the horizon. The craftsmen who had built it were long gone, yet their work remained alive, breathing in every fiber of oak, every iron rivet hammered with patience, every plank shaped by hand and fire. In the village, word of the ship had traveled from hearth to hearth, from elder to child. It was said that this vessel had not merely been built, it had been born. Each log chosen with care from the forest, felled during the right season when the sap was low and the wood strongest. Each timber soaked, bent, and shaped until it curved like the ribs of a living creature. The keel had been placed upon the earth as though laying down the spine of a giant. And when the first nail struck wood, the air had trembled, as if the gods themselves leaned closer to listen. The blacksmiths had forged the iron fastenings in their smoky huts, the sparks flying like stars in miniature, echoing the heavens. Each strike of hammer on anvil carried rhythm, as though they were not merely forging metal, but summoning the heartbeat of the ship. Carvers etched runes into the beams, words older than memory, blessings for safe passage, strength against storms, and the guidance of spirits unseen. The villagers remembered the day the sails were raised for the first time. They were woven from wool, dyed in colors drawn from roots and berries, deep crimson, pale gold, and shades of sea green. When the wind caught them, they swelled like the breath of giants, and the ship shuddered as though awakening from a long sleep. Children had laughed, running along the sand, their voices mixing with the creak of ropes and the crash of waves. The old ones had nodded in silence, knowing what such a vessel meant. Journeys far beyond the sight of land, into waters no map had marked. At night, the ship seemed to listen, The waves licked gently at its sides, as if whispering promises of distant horizons. The stars overhead stretched vast and endless, and in their patterns, the seers claimed to read omens. They spoke of journeys where ravens would guide, where storms would test, where shores of unknown lands would rise from the mist. Men gathered around the vessel, their eyes filled with both pride and fear, for every plank carried strength, but also burden. A ship such as this was not built for the shallow bays of home. It was built to cut across the open sea, to face the fury of storms, to reach beyond the world they knew. To step onto its deck was to step into fate itself. The chieftain, a man with hair like silver frost and eyes as sharp as a hawk's, stood before his people. His voice, low and steady, carried through the night. This ship is more than wood and iron. It is our will, our blood, our bond. With it, we carry the voices of our ancestors and the hopes of our children. The sea does not forgive, but it remembers. The longship rested on the waters like a dark arrow drawn upon a vast bow, ready to be released into the endless horizon. The villagers had returned to their homes, yet the beach was not empty. Torches burned low, their flames bending in the salty breeze, casting long shadows that danced across the wet sand. Around the ship, the chosen men remained, warriors whose lives were about to be bound not only to the sea, but to each other. They stood in silence at first, listening to the low growl of waves breaking upon the shore. The silence was not empty. It was alive, filled with unspoken thoughts, fears that dared not find words, and hopes too fragile to name. Each man knew what it meant to step aboard. Behind them lay the hearths of their ancestors, the safety of land, the smell of soil after rain. Ahead lay uncertainty. Storms, battles, lands unseen, perhaps death, yet also, perhaps, glory. The chieftain returned, a cloak of wolfskin draped across his shoulders. In his hand he held a folded cloth, dark as midnight. The men stirred when they saw it, for they knew what it was. The Raven Banner. It was said the banner was woven by seers in a single night, under the watchful gaze of the moon. No hand of man had guided the loom. It moved on its own, threads dancing as if woven by the spirits. When it was finished, the cloth bore the image of a raven, wings outstretched, eyes unblinking, as if caught mid-flight between worlds. Some whispered that the bird within the banner was not merely a symbol, but alive, its spirit bound to the fabric, watching, waiting. The chieftain spoke, his voice a low rumble, steady as the earth. This banner is not of men, but of the gods. Wherever it flies, fate shall follow. When it stirs in the wind, so too shall stir the will of Odin. Know this, if the raven flies, victory may be ours. If it hangs limp, beware, for doom walks close. The men lowered their heads, the weight of his words sinking into their bones. One by one, they placed their hands upon the banner, swearing oaths. Not loud, not boastful, but whispers. Promises meant for the gods alone. They swore to face the sea with courage, to protect their brothers beside them, to honor their ancestors no matter what awaited. When the last oath was spoken, the chieftain unfurled the banner. The raven stretched its wings, black against the pale dawn sky, and though no wind stirred, the cloth rippled, as though alive, as though it breathed. A murmur passed through the warriors, a shiver running like a shadow across their hearts. The ship was loaded with provisions, barrels of dried fish, sacks of grain, skins of mead and water. Weapons were laid in bundles, spears tipped with iron, shields painted with red spirals, swords carefully wrapped in leather. Each man carried his own blade, worn and scarred from years of use, yet sharpened for the days ahead. Before boarding, the seer appeared. She was old, her hair long and white as snow, her eyes clouded yet piercing. Shelia, Ned on a staff carved with runes, its top adorned with feathers and bones. The warriors parted in silence, for none dared stand in her path. She touched the prow of the ship, whispering words that no one could understand. Her voice was like the wind slipping through cracks in stone, ancient, hollow, eternal. At last, she raised her gaze to the men. "The sea hungers," she said. "It will take what it is owed. Not all of you will return, but those who do shall return as more than men. They shall return as songs." Her words lingered in the air like smoke, and none dared speak. The men boarded the longship one by one, the sound of boots striking wood echoing into the dawn. They took their places at the oars, hands gripping the worn handles, feeling the grooves carved by those who had rowed before them. The chieftain stood at the center, the raven banner rising above him, black against the light of morning. When the first command was given, the oars dipped into the water as one, and the ship surged forward. Waves slapped against its sides, spray leaping high into the air. With each pull, the ship moved faster, the shore shrinking behind them, the horizon widening ahead. The land faded into mist, and the sea stretched vast and endless. The men rowed in silence, their breaths rising in rhythm, the oars creaking like a heartbeat. The banner snapped above them, its raven seeming to take flight, wings quivering with unseen power. The voyage had begun. Far above, real ravens circled, their cries echoing across the waves. Whether they were flesh or spirit, none could tell. The men only rowed, their eyes fixed on the horizon, their hearts bound to the banner, their fates tied to the sea. And somewhere in the depths below, the sea listened. The sea stretched vast and merciless, a shifting mirror of iron-gray waves that rolled endlessly into the horizon. For days, the longship had carved its path across those waters, guided only by the stars at night and the distant cry of gulls by day. The men rowed in rhythm, their backs aching, their palms raw, yet no complaint left their lips. To falter was to fall behind, and to fall behind was to invite death. At first, the sea had been calm, almost deceitfully so. The sun would rise, a pale gold disk above the water, and the ship would glide forward like an arrow loosed from the bow of the gods themselves. The men would sing in low voices, songs of home, of women waiting by the fire, of ancestors who watched from beyond. Their voices rose and fell like the tide, carrying courage into their hearts and banishing the silence that threatened to consume them. But the sea is no friend to men. It does not forgive, nor does it forget. And soon, its face began to change. Clouds gathered in the distance, black and heavy, stacking upon one another like mountains of smoke. The wind grew restless, tugging at hair and cloak, whistling sharp through the oar-holes. The raven banner above the chieftain shuddered violently, the raven's wings thrashing as though it sought to tear free of the fabric and escape into the sky. "Row steady," the chieftain commanded, his voice deep and calm, though his eyes never left the approaching storm. "The gods test us. Hold fast." The men bent their backs once more, muscles straining as they pulled the ship into the rising swell. The water darkened, turning from silver to black, waves swelling higher, slamming against the hull with booming force. Each strike was a warning, a reminder of the power beneath. Then the storm fell upon them. The sky split with thunder, a roar that shook the air. as lightning carved white scars across the heavens. Rain poured in sheets, stinging like needles, drenching hair and leather, blinding eyes. The sea rose in fury, waves towering like beasts, crashing down with teeth of foam. The ship bucked and groaned, wood creaking under the strain, every nail and joint screaming with the weight of the storm. Men clung to their oars, their shields, to anything they could grasp. Salt spray burned their eyes, filled their mouths, dragged at their breath. One by one they roared against it, not in fear but in defiance. For they were not farmers now, nor mere fishermen. They were wolves upon the sea, and though the storm sought to devour them, they would bare their teeth and howl. The chieftain stood unshaken, his wolfskin cloak plastered to his shoulders, his hand gripping the mast. Above him, the raven banner writhed in the gale, snapping with such violence it seemed ready to tear. The raven's form twisted, wings spread wide, eyes glaring down at the men below, and some swore that in that moment the bird moved. "Do not falter," the chieftain bellowed, voice thundering against thunder itself. "Odin watches. The sea may take what it is owed, but it will not take our courage." Lightning flashed, and in its glare the men saw each other's faces. Faces twisted not in fear, but in grim determination. Each stroke of the oars became a heartbeat, a promise that they would not yield. But the storm was merciless. A wave rose higher than the mast itself, a mountain of black water crowned with foam, its shadow blotting out the world. The men cried out, some in prayer, some in rage. Dawn came slowly, dragging pale light across the broken sea. The longship drifted forward, battered yet unbroken, its wood scarred from the storm's fury. Men slumped over their oars, eyes hollow, muscles trembling, but still they moved as one, each stroke a vow that they would not be undone. The storm had taken much from them, strength, warmth, even comrades, but it had not taken their will. For 3 more days, the horizon was nothing but water, endless, merciless water. At night the stars returned, glittering across the heavens like the eyes of ancestors. Some men prayed softly beneath their breath, whispering to Odin, to Thor, to Njord the sea god, offering promises should they reach land again. Others said nothing, staring into the dark, hearing only the echo of waves and the phantom roar of the storm still ringing in their ears. The chieftain, grim and silent, stood watch at the prow. His cloak hung heavy with salt, his beard stiff with sea wind. Yet his eyes burned with unshaken purpose. He had seen the raven in the storm, wings alive, eyes blazing. He had felt its gaze pierce him to the bone. To him, it was no illusion. The banner had spoken, and its voice had promised destiny. On the 4th morning, a cry rose from the man atop the mast. Land! The word tore through the silence like a spear. Heads lifted, eyes narrowed against the rising sun. And there, far across the waves, lay the faint outline of a coast. A jagged spine of cliffs rising from the sea, crowned with mist and forest. Hope surged through weary hearts. Voices lifted, a broken cheer trembling into the air. Oars struck water with renewed strength, driving the longship forward. Salt-stung eyes filled with fire once more, for there before them lay salvation, perhaps even glory. Yet as they drew closer, unease slithered among them. The cliffs were high, dark, and unwelcoming. Black stone jutted like the teeth of some vast beast, waves smashing into them with thunderous rage. Above, the forest stretched thick and endless, ancient trees shrouded in fog, their branches like claws tearing at the sky. This is no friendly shore, muttered one man, his voice low. Perhaps it is not meant to be, answered another. The ship slid between jagged rocks, oars pulling with cautious strength. The sea narrowed into a hidden inlet, calm but eerily still. The cliffs loomed overhead, shadows swallowing the ship as gulls circled and cried their harsh songs. At last the longship scraped against pebbled sand. Its journey across the endless water finally ended. The men staggered ashore, feet sinking into unfamiliar earth. They dropped to their knees, kissing the ground, hands clutching soil as though it were treasure itself. Some wept openly, not with weakness but with relief, the weight of survival breaking them at last. The chieftain alone stood tall, his gaze sweeping the land. He saw the forest waiting, silent and watchful. He saw the cliffs rising behind, cutting them off from the sea like prison walls. And he felt again the raven's gaze, burning within his chest. "This is the place," he said, voice steady as stone. "The gods have brought us here. Whatever awaits, it is our fate." They built a fire upon the shore, its smoke curling into the mist. Around it they gathered, drying their cloaks, eating the last of their salted meat. Yet even as warmth returned to their bodies, unease grew in their hearts. For the forest beyond the firelight whispered with voices not their own. Leaves shivered though no wind stirred, and in the distance, faint as breath, came the sound of drums. The men froze, heads snapping toward the trees. Eyes widened, hands tightened on axe and spear. "Do you hear it?" one whispered. The chieftain nodded slowly. "They know we are here." Silence fell heavy, broken only by the crackle of the fire and the slow beat of drums echoing from the depths of the forest. Each note was a warning, a challenge, a promise. Night descended, smothering the sky in shadow. The fire burned bright, casting long shapes upon the sand. The men sat in a circle, weapons close, eyes fixed on the dark wall of trees. The drums continued, steady and patient, like a heartbeat that was not their own. And then, from within the forest, two lights appeared. Pale, glimmering lights, swaying gently as they moved closer. Torches. The chieftain rose, his hand upon his sword. The men followed, forming a wall of steel and resolve. The raven banner, torn but unyielding, flapped in the night wind above them. The torches drew nearer, and with them came figures, tall, cloaked, their faces hidden by carved masks of wood and bone. They moved without haste, without fear, their presence heavy with an ancient power. The drums fell silent. The masked figures halted at the edge of the firelight. For a long moment, no one spoke. The sea whispered behind them, the fire cracked between them, the forest loomed around them. At last, one of the masked figures raised a hand, and a voice, deep, resonant, older than the trees themselves, spoke. "You have come to the land of shadows. Few who enter leave. Tell us, wolves of the sea, why should you be spared?" The men shifted uneasily, but the chieftain stepped forward, his voice carrying across the silence. "We are not here to beg. We are not here to flee. We come as warriors. If this is your land, then let us prove ourselves upon it. If it belongs to no one, then the gods themselves have given it to us." The masked figures did not answer at once. Their silence pressed heavy, their presence unyielding. Then, slowly, one lowered its torch, planting it in the ground. "Then you will be tested." The men gathered around the fire felt its bite as the wind cut through their cloaks and the forest loomed black and endless. The torches of the masked figures were gone, but their echo remained in the steady rhythm of drums that pounded from deep within the woods. It was not a sound of welcome, nor of warning. It was the sound of a summons. The chieftain stood tall, though weariness pulled at his bones. His hand gripped the hilt of his sword, knuckles white, eyes fixed on the tree-line where shadows seemed to shift and breathe. His men looked to him, not because fear had vanished, but because fear demanded a leader, and he was all they had left. "They want us to follow," one muttered, his voice hoarse. "Or they want us to die," another spat. The chieftain's voice cut through the night. "We did not survive the storm to cower before drums. The gods did not bring us here to turn back. We walk into the forest. Together." No man spoke against him, for what else was there? To stay was to wait for death. To leave was to face it with steel in hand. And so, when the fire burned low, they rose, took their weapons, and followed the beat of drums into the darkness. The forest swallowed them whole. Trees rose like giants, their trunks wider than a man's reach, their branches clawing at the stars. Fog clung to the ground, twisting around boots, masking roots and stones. Every sound echoed strangely. Steps seemed doubled, whispers lingered too long, and the creak of branches groaned like voices. The further they walked, the louder the drums grew. Not chaotic, but steady, as though marking the pace of their journey, guiding them deeper into the heart of something ancient. One man muttered, "These trees, they watch us." Another hissed, "Do not speak, they will hear." Still they pressed on. Hours passed, though time seemed meaningless. Hunger gnawed at them, thirst burned in their throats, but none dared stop. At last, the trees parted into a clearing lit by fire. There, a great circle had been drawn into the earth. Charcoal lines burned into soil, symbols of spirals, claws, and serpents. Around it stood the masked figures, silent, their torches burning with pale blue flame. At the center of the circle rose a stone altar, black as night, carved with runes older than any Viking tongue. The drums stopped. Silence fell heavy, crushing. One of the masked figures stepped forward, its mask carved in the shape of a wolf's skull. When it spoke, its voice was neither man nor woman, but something deeper, as if the forest itself spoke through it. "You come to claim a land not yours. You come with blood and fire in your hearts. Then prove yourselves to the shadows. Step into the circle. Face the trial. If you triumph, the land is yours. If you fall, your bones will join the earth you sought to claim." The men shifted uneasily, axes tightened in hands, shields lifted. Yet no man stepped forward. The chieftain's voice rose, calm and unyielding. "Then I will stand first." He strode into the circle, the raven banner tied to his back, its fabric torn but defiant. The masked figures raised their torches high, and the runes upon the altar flared with light, bathing the clearing in a glow both holy and unholy. The ground trembled. From the shadows at the edge of the circle came shapes. Tall, hunched, their eyes burning like coals. They were not men, not beasts, but something between, creatures woven of mist and bone, claws dripping with shadow. Their forms shifted, as though half in this world and half beyond it. The men gasped, fear choking their throats. "What sorcery is this?" The wolf-masked figure's voice cut the air. "This is no sorcery. This is truth. These are the shades of warriors long forgotten, guardians of the land. Defeat them or be devoured." The first of the shadow creatures lunged. The chieftain roared, his sword flashing in firelight, cleaving through mist and bone. The creature shrieked, its form splitting apart before collapsing into smoke. But more came, clawing, striking, snapping with jaws that dripped blackness. The circle became a battlefield. Steel clashed with shadow. Men bellowed war cries. Shields splintered. Axes rose and fell. Each creature struck down dissolved into smoke. But for each one slain, another emerged from the dark. The air filled with the stench of iron and ash, the screams of both men and shades. One warrior was dragged down, claws tearing through his chest. Another fought with wild fury, only to vanish beneath the swarm. Blood soaked the earth, mixing with the runes that glowed brighter with each drop spilled. The chieftain fought like a man possessed, his blade a storm of death, his voice thunder. "Stand, brothers, do not yield." And yet, deep within, he felt it. The trial was not meant to be won by steel alone. The creatures were endless, a tide unbroken. For every swing, for every scream, the shadows pressed harder. It was not strength they sought, it was something else. Then he remembered the raven, its eyes in the storm, its wings above the mast, its gaze upon him demanding, guiding. Dropping his shield, he raised his sword high, voice booming across the clearing. "Odin, All-Father, if these are the guardians of destiny, then let them test me with more than steel. Let them weigh my spirit, my will, my soul." The shades froze, the clearing stilled. The masked figures lowered their torches. The runes upon the altar flared blindingly bright, swallowing shadow and flame alike. The creatures shrieked as their forms unraveled, dissolving into smoke that spiraled upward and vanished into the night sky. Silence. Only the chieftain remained standing in the circle, chest heaving, blood dripping from blade and brow. Around him, his men knelt, battered and broken, but alive. The shadows were gone. The trial had ended. The wolf-masked figure approached, its voice calm but heavy as stone. "You have faced the trial of shadows. You have shed blood, and yet you endure. This land may yet be yours, if you prove worthy of it." The masked figures vanished back into the forest, their torches flickering out one by one, until only darkness remained. The men sat in silence, too weary to speak, too shaken to cheer. The forest was no less dangerous, the path ahead no less grim, but they had survived what no man should. And for the first time since leaving their homeland, they felt the weight of destiny pressing upon them. The clearing stank of blood and smoke. Men staggered among corpses, breathing ragged, blades still dripping. The shadows had vanished, yet their touch lingered, a coldness in bone, a weight in the chest. The chieftain stood at the center of the ruined circle, sword planted in earth blackened with ash. He did not speak at first. He simply looked at his men, one by one, at their torn armor, at their hollow eyes, at the wounds that bled but had not yet killed. They had faced the impossible and still breathed, but survival was not victory. He lifted his head to the heavens. The stars glared down through breaks in the mist, sharp and cold, like the eyes of gods watching their pawns move upon a board of blood. The raven banner on his back stirred in the wind. At last he spoke. "We came to claim new lands. We thought steel alone would carve our fate. But the shadows have taught us truth. Blood must bind us, not only ours, but the blood of oath." The men shifted uneasily. Some frowned, some nodded. They knew what he meant before he spoke it. For among Vikings, there were oaths made with words, and oaths made with steel, but the strongest oath was sealed with blood. The chieftain raised his sword, the runes along its hilt glimmering faintly in firelight. "Here, under the gaze of gods, I call upon you, brothers. If we are to take this land, if we are to defy death itself, we must bind our souls. Not one man shall betray, not one man shall falter. From this night forth, we are not merely men, we are blood-bound. Silence fell. Then one warrior, tall and scarred, stepped forward. He drew his blade across his palm, crimson spilling onto soil. He pressed his hand against the chieftain's. My blood for yours, my soul for the land we claim. Another followed, then another. Soon, every man cut his hand, the circle of warriors pressing palms together, blood mingling in the dirt until the soil itself drank their oath. The fire roared higher, though no one fed it. The earth trembled, though no storm rumbled. From the shadows above, a raven's cry split the night. The men froze, heads lifted. There it was, the raven, black as night, wings vast, circling once above the clearing before vanishing into fog. The omen struck deep into their hearts. Some whispered Odin's name, others simply stared, hollow-eyed, at the heavens. The chieftain's voice thundered. The All-Father hears. The oath is sealed. We are bound by steel, by blood, by shadow. Let the land tremble, for its masters have been chosen. The men roared in answer, their voices savage, echoing through the forest like wolves howling to the moon. Yet among them stood one who did not roar, one who pressed his bloody hand to theirs, yet his eyes were dark, calculating. He had lost too much, his brother devoured by shadows, his mind unraveling under terror. Rage festered in him like rot. He looked at the chieftain and saw not a leader, but a man who had led them to ruin. He would not break the oath, he could not, but he whispered to himself in silence, hidden beneath the cries of his brothers. Blood binds me, but blood can also spill. The gods had taken his kin. Perhaps they would take more. Perhaps he would give them a gift. When dawn crept pale through the trees, the warriors rose. Weary though they were, the oath burned hot in their veins. The drums of the masked figures were gone, but new drums beat within their chests, born of rage, of hunger, of destiny. They marched through the forest, across rivers that steamed with morning mist, past stones carved with runes too ancient to read. They hunted when they could, fought beasts when they must, but all the while they moved as one. Every night they gathered in circle, wounds stitched with fire and words, meat shared, tales whispered. Yet every night the raven returned, circling above their campfire, silent, watching. One warrior asked, "Why does it follow us?" Another answered, "It does not follow, it leads." The chieftain said nothing, but in his heart he knew. The raven was no mere bird. It was the eye of Odin, marking them, weighing them. And as they marched, the land itself seemed to shift. The trees grew taller, the rivers darker, the winds colder. Once, they found a field where bones jutted from the soil like spears, skulls staring empty-eyed at the sky. Once they saw fires in the distance, though no men walked there. Once they heard whispers in the night that spoke their names. Still they marched. On the seventh night, they reached the cliffs. The sea thundered below, black waves smashing against jagged stone. Atop the cliffs stood stones arranged in a circle, taller than men, carved with spirals and symbols that glowed faintly in moonlight. The men approached, weary yet reverent. They felt it in their bones. This was no place of mortals. The chieftain strode into the circle. His eyes roamed the stones, the sea, the sky. Then he turned to his men. "This is the place. The land awaits our claim, but the gods demand more than oath. They demand offering." The men knew what he meant. They had sworn blood. Now they must give blood, not of themselves, but of sacrifice. A goat was brought forth, its cries sharp in the night. The chieftain's blade flashed, blood spilling onto stone, soaking into spirals that glowed brighter, pulsing like a heartbeat. The sea roared louder, the wind screamed, then silence. The raven landed atop the tallest stone, its eyes gleaming like molten gold. Cawed once, twice, wings spread wide, and the runes blazed with fire. The men fell to their knees, shielding eyes from the blaze. The sea raged below the cliffs, a black mouth swallowing moonlight. The warriors slept in broken circles around the stones, their breaths heavy, their wounds still raw. The blood oath still throbbed in their veins, but exhaustion had claimed them at last. Yet the chieftain did not sleep. He stood upon the highest rock, eyes on the horizon, hand upon the hilt of his sword. The raven's call still echoed in his ears. He felt the gods close, closer than ever before. The air was thick with power, the land itself restless beneath his boots. But power is never free. Far from the firelight, beyond the circle of stones, one man stirred. His eyes glowed faintly in the half-dark, not with light, but with reflection of his thoughts. Thoughts poisoned, festering. This was Sigvard, brother to the fallen. He had spilled his blood with the rest. He had spoken the words of the oath, but his heart burned black. He heard them whispers, not the wind, not the sea, voices from the stones, voices from the blood-soaked earth. They spoke his name, they spoke his brother's name. They promised vengeance if only he would offer. He clenched his fist until the scar across his palm bled anew. My oath binds me, but even the gods thirst for betrayal. The shadows gathered, curling at his feet like smoke, pulling at him, pulling him away from loyalty and toward destiny. The next evening, the men feasted. They had taken deer from the forest, roasted it upon spits, the fat hissing as flames devoured it. Ale was poured from casks, horns raised, voices booming in drunken song. They sang of victory yet to come, of lands not yet claimed, of women not yet taken. They sang to bury fear, to silence memory of the masked shadows, to forget the raven's gaze. The chieftain laughed with them, drank with them, though his eyes were sharp, scanning. He felt the unease slither beneath the merriment, a crack in the circle of brotherhood. When the fire burned low, he stood. Brothers, we are marked by gods. The stones themselves blaze at our oath, but the land will not give itself easily. Tomorrow we march inland. Villages lie ahead, warriors who will not kneel. We must strike fast, strike hard, before the shadows return. The men roared, slamming horns against shields. They were ready for war, but in the corner of the firelight, Sigvard did not cheer. He only smiled, teeth white in shadow. His hand never left the dagger at his belt. That night, the raven came again. It landed upon the very stone where the blood had spilled. The firelight flickered upon its feathers, turning them bronze, then black, then bronze again, as though it shifted between worlds. The chieftain saw it first. He approached, bowing his head slightly. "What sign do you bring, All-Father's servant?" That night the raven came again. It landed upon the very stone where the blood had spilled. The firelight flickered upon its feathers, turning them bronze, then black, then bronze again, as though it shifted between worlds. The chieftain saw it first. He approached, bowing his head slightly. "What sign do you bring, All-Father's servant?" The raven tilted its head. Then, in a voice that was not a cry, not a caw, but something in between, something almost human, it spoke. "Blood has been bound. Blood will be broken." The chieftain froze. His hand gripped his sword. "What do you mean?" But the raven only spread its wings and vanished into the night. The chieftain returned to the fire, unease gnawing at his gut. He looked at his men, asleep in drunken stupor, and wondered which of them would break. The answer came before dawn. The sky was still black when Sigurd rose. He moved silent as frost, dagger gleaming faint in moonlight. He crept among his sleeping brothers, past snoring warriors sprawled with horns at their sides, past shields leaning against stones. His breath came slow, steady. He stopped at the chieftain's side. The man slept lightly, hand still resting on the hilt of his sword even in slumber. His face, lit by ember glow, seemed carved from stone, unyielding, immortal. Sigvard's teeth clenched. "You led my brother to death," he whispered. "You chained us to gods that drink our blood. You will not chain me." The dagger rose, but before it fell, eyes snapped open. The chieftain's hand shot up, gripping Sigvard's wrist like iron. The fire flared, as though the gods themselves gasped. The camp erupted. Warriors scrambled to their feet, blades flashing, shields raised. In moments, a circle formed around them. The chieftain rose, towering, eyes blazing with fury. "Sigvard, brother of oath, what treachery is this?" Sigvard spat, face twisted in rage and grief. "Oath? You bound us to shadows. You fed my brother to the dark. I will not follow you to death. I will carve my own fate." The men murmured, torn between loyalty and doubt. The raven's words echoed in their skulls. "Blood will be broken.